"Sir, this is a restricted area. I'm going to have to ask you to turn around." The voice was sharp, laced with the brittle confidence of a man who had never been truly tested. Commander Michael Davis stood ramrod straight, his uniform a masterpiece of creases and polish, a stark contrast to the dusty, sun-bleached landscape of the Fort Bragg training perimeter. Before him stood an old man, seemingly adrift in time. His clothes were worn but clean, a faded flannel shirt, denim jeans softened by 1,000 washings, and scuffed work boots. His face was a roadmap of wrinkles, and his eyes, a pale, washed-out blue, held a placid depth that seemed to absorb the commander's aggressive energy without reaction. The old man simply held a small, canvas satchel and looked out towards the distant sound of live-fire exercises. He hadn't been trying to enter the base, merely standing by the fence line, observing. Davis, however, saw a vagrant, a security risk, an untidy element spoiling the perfect military order of his afternoon. "Did you hear me, old man?" Davis stepped closer, his voice dropping an octave, employing the tone he used on insubordinate recruits. "This fence line is federal property. You're trespassing." The old man finally turned his gaze from the horizon and settled it on the commander. There was no fear in his eyes, no defiance, just a quiet, patient assessment. "I'm not on your side of the fence, son," he said, his voice a low, gravelly hum. "Just watching." "Reminds me of the old days," Davis scoffed, a short, sharp sound of derision. "The old days? Let me guess, you peeled potatoes in the mess hall during the Korean War and have been dining out on it ever since." He gestured dismissively at the man's attire. "We have standards here. This isn't a public park for you to reminisce. This is a training ground for the most elite fighting force in the world. A place where real soldiers do real work." The old man's expression didn't change, but a flicker of something, disappointment, perhaps, passed through his pale eyes. "I'm aware of what happens here." The simple statement, delivered without any hint of challenge, seemed to infuriate Davis even more. His authority was being met not with defiance, which he could crush, but with a serene indifference that he couldn't comprehend. He felt his temper, always simmering just beneath his polished exterior, begin to boil. He saw a few of his junior officers watching from a distance, and the need to assert his dominance became overwhelming. This shambling relic was an insult to the uniform he wore, to the very institution he represented. "You're aware, are you?" Davis took another step, invading the old man's personal space. The man didn't flinch, didn't step back. He stood his ground like an ancient oak, weathered but unmovable. "Let me tell you something, old-timer. The men out there," Davis jabbed a finger toward the echoing blasts of the training range, "are learning how to fight and win America's wars. They don't have time for sidewalk supervisors and wannabe heroes cluttering up the view. What could you possibly know about their world?" The old man was silent for a long moment, his gaze drifting back to the range. "More than you think," he said, so quietly it was almost carried away by the wind. The quiet certainty of the reply was the final straw for Commander Davis. It was an affront to his rank, his authority, his entire sense of self. He saw this not as a simple trespass, but as a fundamental challenge to the order of his world. The crisp, hierarchical structure of the military was being ignored by this nobody. He decided to humiliate him, to break him down in front of his men and restore the proper order of things. He would make an example of this disrespectful vagrant. "Oh, I'm sure," Davis said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "A real warrior, are you?" Hidden beneath that ensemble, he looked the old man up and down with theatrical disdain. "Tell you what, if you've got so much experience, you must have served. So tell me, what was your unit?" "The 101st Chairborne Division? The Fort Dix Chow Hall Commandos." A few of the younger soldiers nearby snickered, emboldened by their commander's cruelty. The old man's shoulders slumped, just a fraction, but his eyes remained locked on Davis. "I served," that was all he said. "You served?" Davis repeated, mocking the flat tone. "Everybody served. My mailman served. It doesn't give you the right to loiter around a restricted military installation. What else? You got a service number you remember? Or has that faded along with everything else?" The old man's hand went unconsciously to his chest, over his flannel shirt, as if feeling for dog tags that were no longer there. He recited a 9-digit number, the cadence perfect, the numbers flowing with a familiarity that spoke of decades of muscle memory. Davis was momentarily taken aback by the speed and clarity of the recitation, but recovered quickly. Cute. You memorized one. Probably from a movie. He leaned in, his face now inches from the old man's, his voice a low, menacing hiss. Men who have actually seen things, who have actually done things, they have a look in their eye. A bearing. You? You just look tired. You look like a man who was defeated by life a long time ago. Now, for the last time, get out of here before I have you arrested for trespassing and impersonating a veteran. The accusation hung in the air, heavy and vile. The old man absorbed it, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. The quiet dignity that had surrounded him began to feel less like passivity and more like immense, restrained pressure, like the deep, silent water behind a dam. Impersonating, he whispered, the word tasting like ash in his mouth. You think I'm lying about my service? Davis smiled, a cold, triumphant smirk. I think you're a sad old man looking for a little bit of reflected glory. Happens all the time. But you picked the wrong base, the wrong CO. We don't tolerate stolen valor here. He straightened up, puffing out his chest. So come on. Let's play your little game. Every real operator, every pilot, every soldier who's been in the thick of it has a call sign. It's a mark of identity. So tell me, Grandpa, what was your call sign? He crossed his arms, leaning back, the picture of arrogant certainty. He expected silence, a mumbled excuse, or a hasty retreat. He was ready to laugh, to call over the military police and have the man hauled away, a final, public demonstration of his absolute authority. The old man looked away from Davis, his gaze turning inward, as if accessing a part of himself long dormant, a room in his mind that hadn't been opened for decades. The wind picked up, whipping dust around their feet. The distant sounds of warfare seemed to fall silent, the world holding its breath. When he finally spoke, his voice was different. The gravelly softness was gone, replaced by something harder, something that cut through the air with chilling precision. It was the voice of command, of absolute finality. Phantom lead, the words were quiet, but they landed with the force of a physical blow. Commander Davis blinked. The name meant nothing to him. It was probably just more nonsense, something the old man made up on the spot. He was about to laugh, to call him out on the ridiculous, melodramatic name, when he noticed movement out of the corner of his eye. A young sergeant, first class, who had been observing the exchange from about 30 yards away, had frozen mid-stride. His face, tan and weathered from years in the field, had gone completely, unnervingly pale. The sergeant's eyes were wide, locked on the old man not with curiosity, but with a look of pure, unadulterated shock that bordered on reverence. He fumbled for the radio on his vest, his hand shaking. Davis saw the sergeant's lips move, whispering into the handset, his eyes never leaving the old man. What is it, Sergeant? Davis barked, annoyed at the interruption to his victory. The sergeant ignored him. He was speaking urgently into his radio, his voice a low, frantic murmur. Get the base commander. Now. Sir. I don't know how, but confirm call sign Phantom Lead is at the north gate. I repeat, authenticate and verify. This is not a drill, Davis's smirk faltered. What was happening? It had to be a mistake. Sergeant, what in the hell are you doing? He demanded, striding toward him. But the sergeant held up a hand, a gesture of such abrupt authority that Davis actually stopped in his tracks. Sir, with all due respect, you need to be quiet. And you need to not let that man leave. The sergeant's voice was trembling. Under any circumstances, the world seemed to tilt on its axis. Suddenly, Davis was no longer in control. An invisible current of electricity was crackling through the air, an energy emanating from the quiet old man by the fence. On the base, less than a mile away, a klaxon began to sound. Not the familiar wail of a fire drill, but a piercing, urgent alarm Davis had only ever heard in simulations. It was the sound of a top-tier security alert, an Omega-level threat or arrival. Men started pouring out of barracks, not with the lazy shuffle of a drill, but with the panicked efficiency of a real-world crisis. 2 MPs in a patrol vehicle, who had been slowly approaching the scene to support Davis, suddenly slammed on their brakes. A crackle came over their radio, and the driver's eyes went wide. He grabbed his radio, nodding frantically. Then, he put the vehicle in reverse and backed away, fast, establishing a perimeter 100 yards away. Davis looked back at the old man, who hadn't moved. He was just standing there, his hands now resting on the top rail of the fence, looking like a simple farmer observing his fields. But he was no longer just an old man. He was the epicenter of a storm that was growing with terrifying speed. Davis's own radio chirped. It was the base commander, Colonel Matthews. His voice was strained, breathless. "Davis, what is your status?" "Talk to me, sir. I'm at the North Gate perimeter. I have a civilian trespasser." "Is he with you, Davis? Is the asset secure?" The word asset threw Davis completely. "Sir, I have an old man here who—" "Commander." Matthews' voice was a roar, devoid of all military decorum. It was the sound of pure panic. "Your one and only job right now is to stand there and ensure that gentleman is not offended, is not alarmed, and does not, under any circumstances, depart. Do you understand me? The Secretary of Defense is on a priority line, and a Tier 1 extraction team has been scrambled from Pope Air Force Base. They're 5 minutes out. What in God's name did you say to him?" Davis's mouth went dry. The world was spinning. Extraction team? The SEC def? He looked at the old man, at his worn boots and faded shirt, and a cold, horrifying dread began to seep into his bones. Who was this man? He heard the sound before he saw them, the deep, percussive thud of heavy rotor blades cutting through the air. 2 black HH-60 Pave Hawk helicopters, the kind used by pararescue and special tactics squadrons, were screaming toward their position at treetop level. They weren't flying. They were attacking the ground. As they neared, they flared dramatically, kicking up a hurricane of dust and debris. Heavily armed men in gray tactical gear began to fast rope down before the skids even touched the ground. They formed a perfect, outward-facing circle, their weapons at a low ready, securing the area not against the old man, but for him. A third vehicle, a black, up-armored Chevrolet Suburban, screeched to a halt on the road. The passenger door flew open and a man emerged, his uniform crisp and adorned with 3 stars. Lieutenant General Marcus Thorne, commander of the Joint Special Operations Command, a man Davis had only seen in official photographs, strode past the tactical team as if they were invisible. He ignored Commander Davis completely, his eyes fixed on one person only. The general walked directly up to the old man, his movements precise and filled with an energy that belied his age. He stopped 3 feet away, brought his heels together with a sharp click, and rendered the most perfect, respectful salute Davis had ever seen. "Sir," General Thorne said, his voice thick with emotion and awe. "It is an honor. We thought you were gone." The old man, Silas, finally turned from the fence. He looked at the general, the helicopters, the ring of elite soldiers, and a faint, sad smile touched his lips. He returned the salute with a slow, tired grace, his movements economical but still sharp. "Just passing through, Marcus," Silas said. "Didn't mean to cause a fuss." General Thorne held his salute, his eyes shining. "You could never cause a fuss, sir. The honor is all ours." He finally lowered his hand and turned his head slightly, his gaze falling upon Commander Davis for the first time. The look in the general's eyes was not one of anger. It was something far worse. It was a look of cold, profound disappointment and pity. "Commander Davis," General Thorne said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Tell me exactly what happened here." Davis felt his throat constrict. He tried to speak, but only a dry croak emerged. The entire world had inverted. The man he had berated, humiliated, and threatened to arrest was being saluted by one of an officer of the highest rank in the military. The vagrant was Sir. The wannabe was an asset. He could feel the eyes of every soldier on him. The snickering junior officers now frozen in horror, realizing they were witnesses to a career-ending cataclysm. "General," Davis stammered, his polished shoes feeling like lead weights. I was securing the perimeter. This man, he was unauthorized." Thorne cut him off with a slice of his hand. "Commander, let me educate you. You see that man?" He gestured toward Silas, who was now quietly speaking with a member of the tactical team. In 1968, a 5-man long-range reconnaissance team was declared MIA, presumed dead, deep in the A Shao Valley. Their position was overrun. For 3 weeks, they were hunted by an entire NVA battalion. They had no food, no support, and no contact. On the 22nd day, a single American call sign came up on the emergency frequency, directing air strikes on the enemy from inside their own command bunker. That man, then a 20-year-old sergeant, had spent 3 weeks dismantling the enemy from the inside out, alone. He walked out of that jungle a week later with enemy intelligence that saved an entire U.S. division from annihilation. His call sign was Phantom Lead. Davis felt the blood drain from his face. The Ashau Valley. Every student of military history knew the legends. Thorne wasn't finished. His voice was like chipping ice. In 1979, during the hostage crisis, a source deep inside the country provided intelligence so accurate it was believed to be a trap. It wasn't. It was him. He's the reason half of those people ever saw home again. In the 80s, when a certain Soviet general defected, the only person he would agree to be exfiltrated by was a man the KGB called the Ghost. That was him. The general took a step closer to Davis, his voice dropping to a whisper that was more terrifying than any shout. The unit he was a part of has never been officially acknowledged. Their names are not on any memorial wall because, officially, they never existed. They were the ghosts we sent when God himself was unwilling to go. He is not a veteran, commander. He is a living, breathing monument to a level of courage and sacrifice you will never comprehend. And you, with your starched uniform and your petty authority, chose to insult him. General Thorne turned his back on Davis, a gesture of ultimate dismissal. He walked back to Silas. Sir, the secretary is on the line. He sends his deepest apologies and asks if there is anything at all you require. Silas shook his head, looking out at the young soldiers now staring at him with undisguised awe. Just wanted to see the boys train, he said softly. See if the new generation still has the fire. He then looked over Thorne's shoulder, his pale blue eyes finding Davis, who stood frozen in a state of utter shame. That commander, Silas said, his voice carrying on the wind. He has the fire. He's just pointing it in the wrong direction. He's young. General Thorne glanced back at the disgraced commander. He is, sir. And he is about to embark on a very long and very educational journey to correct his aim. Thorne gestured to one of his aides, who brought forward a small, velvet-lined case. He opened it. Inside, nestled on the dark blue fabric, was a single medal Davis had never seen before. It was a simple, dark star with a single diamond at its center. Sir, the President was made aware of your presence. He has, with the full backing of Congress, authorized the immediate declassification of this. The Distinguished Service Cross was a placeholder. This is what you truly earned. He presented the case to Silas. The old man looked at the medal for a long moment, then gently closed the case and handed it back. The honor was in the doing, Marcus, not the getting, he said. Give it to a museum. Maybe it'll teach a young officer like that one what this is all about. He gave Davis one last, long look, a look not of anger or pity, but of something else, something that felt like a challenge. Then he allowed himself to be escorted to the waiting Suburban. As the vehicles and helicopters departed, leaving a swirling cloud of dust in their wake, Commander Davis was left standing alone in the sudden, deafening silence, stripped of everything but the crushing weight of his own arrogance. His career wasn't over. General Thorne had made that clear. Instead, he had been reassigned. His new post, curator and historical officer for a small, dusty records annex at Fort Leavenworth, a place where the forgotten files of forgotten heroes were stored. His first assignment, hand-delivered by a courier from the Pentagon, was to write the official, first-ever history of a unit that never existed and to document the life of its most legendary operator, a quiet man known only as Phantom Lead. It was not a punishment. It was a penance and an education. It was an opportunity, Silas had told the general, for a young man with fire to learn that the brightest flames are often the ones that burn in silence, unseen and unheralded.